name Valiente?
Valiente.
Valiente, thank you. Thank you for being here today. So I've known Iliana for a bit in my short tenure with Deloitte, and as an apt description, she's a trailblazer, I agree, and getting Deloitte actively involved in the blockchain space. She's the co-founder and the strategy leader for a program called Rubix within Deloitte. It's our blockchain practice, and they're a team that provides advisory services and helps to build decentralized applications. Using various technology platforms across areas as diverse as financial services and healthcare. So we're really pleased to have you here today and to share your thoughts and perspective on collaboration and competitions.
Everyone, my name is Iliana Oris Valiente. Very excited to be here today. As mentioned, I lead a technology team, and we primarily work with clients who have heard about this blockchain thing, have spent some time thinking about it, and are on the cusp of going beyond learning about blockchain and thinking through use cases to actually getting to action, building prototypes, building pilots, all with the aim of eventually getting out of the blockchain lab and into production. Now, although the team primarily focuses on the technology aspect, and they're mostly developers, and the nitty-gritty details of the consensus algorithms and the data elements that you need to include as part of your application, what I wanted to talk about today was mostly the business side of things. And I don't mean the typical dollars and cents of here's a use case that's going to increase your efficiency by so and so percent, or here's a use case that's going to increase your revenues by another percentage point because it's introduced a new product. But rather, I wanted to talk about a less discussed topic, which is the process by which companies get to the point that they're going to be creating meaningful blockchain products, the how as part of this equation. Now, in my role, I'm very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to work with a number of clients that span a diverse set of industries, a diverse set of views about technology, innovation, and how they change potentially the status quo or decide to remain within their four walls of the comfort zone. And from this vantage point of the landscape, there are a couple of common themes or lessons learned that I'm starting to see as trends. And it's those trends that I wanted to share with you today, because as I see the room have a number of developers as well as entrepreneurs, I hope that you're able to take these back into your day-to-day lives and figure out if there is potential applicability. So perhaps it's worth starting with the very beginning of our involvement in the blockchain space and some of the differences that we've seen as the technology has evolved over the course of the last couple of years, specifically as it relates to more of the enterprise, big business applications. So a few years ago, I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, back in 2012, more of a personal interest. It wasn't until 2014 that we started having conversations as a firm with our clients and trying to understand what was the broader impact. Now, when we first started talking to some of the big financial institutions, primarily banks, I remember the first meetings that we had that were clandestine meetings. It was, we'll take this meeting, but do not tell anyone that we're in this meeting room, because bank ABC does not want to be the first ones to hit the Financial Post or the Globe and Mail as exploring blockchain technology. Things have really changed. Over the course of the past couple of years, there's been this curve of acceptance and recognition that, okay, there's this Bitcoin thing and we can no longer wish it away. And yes, it has a direct impact on the financial industry, so maybe we need to be paying some attention. All the way through to the banks being very public and loud about the experiments that they happen to be running within their organizations, all the way through to consortiums being formed. And so earlier today, our speaker spoke about R3, which now has close to 100 members, and it's difficult to keep track of all of the newest additions. But I remember the first time I heard about R3. It was from one of their directors, and they had just made the preliminary announcement of, we've gathered the first 9 banks that are going to be part of this. And my reaction was, you did what? And how did you manage to get all of these stakeholders into the same room to have a meaningful conversation without all of them being bogged down with at least a team of 15 lawyers on each of their sides? But it's a testament to how the technology has progressed and how it's gotten broader adoption. And what's taken the financial services industry a couple of years to get comfortable with, we're starting to see those same conversations occurring, but in other industries. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's public sector, whether it's in supply chain applications, we're going through the same education curve where people are trying to see, well, what did other industries do? And is there an applicability to my industry? I can see why the FSI folks jumped at it, because there's a pretty obvious correlation between, this decentralized virtual currency thing that doesn't require a government intervention or a central bank, or potentially the intermediaries that have made their entire businesses off of being the central administrators. There was a direct tie. In some of the other industries, there's more of a leap of faith or creativity applications that are required. But one of the lessons that is becoming abundantly clear is that it's important to pay attention to what is happening outside of your domain. And whether you are a healthcare institution or a supply chain company, or if you're a developer, it means knowing what else is happening, what are the bigger picture trends, and are there lessons that could accelerate your learning and your development so you don't have to go and make the same mistakes more than once. So if we stick with the FSI example, because they're arguably the most mature in their thinking, what happened? After the education piece came the ideation. After the ideation, they whittled down the number of use cases that they want to explore further into a more manageable number. And then what? You build a proof of concept. Maybe you build a second. Maybe you build a pilot, and you start thinking about how you are going to roll this out more broadly. But inevitably, they hit a point where they realize that, these POCs that I'm running within my own four walls, perhaps are not going to be sufficient, because there is an element of scale and an element of interoperability with other systems, and we talk about user experience and what's best for the user. And is it really going to be a product that's brought out by one organization, or something that's a little bit broader? And that's what they're starting to recognize. Now, in other industries, I think arguably you could say that the same thing is occurring, because at the end of the day, it almost seems silly to call this out as a lesson learned, but this is a network technology. And it's fundamentally at the core when we talk about blockchain, and we talk about decentralized ledgers and open source communities of developers who got together and weren't orchestrated by any big powers that be. In the enterprise application world, and even in the nonprofit sector, sometimes we forget that we need to think a little bit more broadly. And so there was a proverb that I stumbled across a couple of days ago, African proverb, that actually kind of inspired the general theme for the presentation. And it's very simple. If you want to walk fast, you walk alone. If you want to walk far, you walk together, which can be very difficult. And I'm sure we've seen with the R3 Consortium and others that you go through a bit of a honeymoon phase and everything looks great and very rosy, but you recognize that when you actually get competitors into a room together, you may end up with different motivations. And so some of the criticisms that have been levied on the existing consortiums is that the individual members are now starting to file their own sets of patents outside of the patents being filed within the organization. And if you need these large numbers in order to succeed, how do you put aside some of the personal or entity-specific competitive tendencies for the benefit of an overall broader ecosystem? And so the word ecosystem, I wanted to expand on that a little bit longer, has been co-opted from the natural sciences world, where you think of the marsh, you think of the bird, you think of the trees, the fish, etc. You have all of these parties, they're all interacting in the same natural environment, they compete for some resources, they collaborate in other instances, but they're always co-evolving with the newest changes in their environment. And in the 1990s, there was a landmark Harvard business case paper that essentially likened that ecosystem concept in the natural sciences world to the business world, where the argument was that there is an opportunity for collaboration that still improves profits and that still drives efficiencies, but at the end of the day is more of a co-opetition model. And so a couple of key components that are required for this model to be successful. One is rallying what the author called the wave makers. So the entities that will be self-funding the innovations and pushing the agenda. Arguably, you could liken the analogy to all of the FSI participants in the R3 type model. But the other requirement, which is really key, is that of a role of an integrator. So a party that can move a group towards broader objectives and keeping that longer term lens. And maybe that ends up being the government entities. Maybe it's the international organizations. Because when you think of blockchain and the types of problems that we're all here hoping that it will solve, they're worldwide problems, they're national problems, they're provincial problems, they're municipal problems. So how do you approach that? So the third aspect of this successful ecosystem approach was that of an integrated portfolio of solutions that are all aligned with one another. So what's the likelihood that all of us here in this room will reach a perfect 100% consensus on the one single best solution to some big thorny problem that we're facing? Slim? None? Maybe some if we're being really, really optimistic, and that's fine. So long as we can keep the focus on building solutions that will interoperate with one another, that move us forward to that ultimate goal, that solve a small sliver of a problem, potentially from a slightly different angle, I think that's where we'll start seeing meaningful progress. So if we look at just one example, and I know Iliana touched on it earlier around healthcare and how many parties are involved. If we walk through a simple scenario, I want you to count how many different viewpoints and perspectives we might encounter. So we are about to approach November. It's cold season. You are all going to be sick at one point in time. I'm sorry to break news. So what happens? You go to your doctor, you get a prescription, you go to a pharmacy, you get a product dispensed. But how did that product end up in that pharmacy? It started out at some factory with chemical components and the active pharmaceutical ingredients that then were compressed into pill or other type of format. Then that product traveled through multiple distribution channels, ended up in the warehousing networks. And then from there, it finally made its way to the final distribution points of the Rexalls and the Shoppers Drug Mart, etc. So in that one very simple value chain, you've hit electronic medical records that, as an individual, I would like to be able to control. Because frankly, I've had over 10 major moves in my lifetime, and I know that there was a sprained ankle here, a broken something over there. Just please don't ask me to figure out what hospital or clinic or what city that it happened in, because frankly, I don't really remember. And if I were to move to Quebec tomorrow, or move to the US, or move to Europe, I would like to be able to port my information with me and be able to have control over it. So there's the individual aspect. But then there is the medical associations who want to be able to keep track of prescriptions being issued. You have the various pharmaceutical companies who are involved in the manufacture and the supply chain aspect. There's the trade finance implications because somebody along the way had to pay for these various products as they were being manufactured. And so what will be important but challenging is figuring out the diverse perspectives of those stakeholders and trying to find ways to reconcile it. And so the approach that we've taken to date, because I will be honest, I don't have the answers. I would love to have had the answers for you, but it's a bit of a work in progress, is distilling these big world picture items into smaller situations that are a little bit more manageable, where you can address what's the problem, what's the solution, what's the user experience requirement to make it consumable and to actually make an impact. So yes, it's a back-end technology, that's good. We would like to get to a point where the end user is abstracted away enough from the challenges of gas and ether and tokenization and private key management, and all they're dealing with is a more seamless, frictionless process, whatever industry or whatever transaction it is that they're trying to undertake. Now, the reason that this can be really challenging from a business perspective is because it doesn't fit into any traditional molds. When you tell a company that's a client of yours that you're going to need to collaborate with these 3 types of stakeholders, the reaction we often hear is, well, we've never done this before. And that's part of the beauty, where we don't want to co-opt the blockchain and its characteristics and just cherry pick 1 or 2 characteristics and ignore the rest. We want to try to find ways that we can modernize the business processes that have resulted from all of our legacy systems that we've just inherited and change them for the better. So an expression that I've actually used with clients when they come to me and say, well, this is a process that we want to add a blockchain to, is you can't blockchainify something for the sake of using blockchain. If it's not solving a critical problem, if you're not using the 4 or 5 key characteristics of a decentralized open ledger, you're not approaching your ideation in the proper way. And on the flip side, you end up with companies that say, you know what, we know this is new, we know this is unorthodox, but the trend we're seeing in the broader world is that people want to own their own data. They are interested in transparency and openness. Why don't we try to come up with new solutions that enable users to actually benefit from that, even though those products and those solutions may not be what you would typically associate with our core business. And frankly, those have been some of the more fun types of projects to work on, especially when they're willing to get into the same room as some of the other folks who need to be as part of that process. So in the past, when I've done presentations, people have asked, how do you go from an idea to action? And the process was, you go through brainstorming, you whittle down your use cases, you select a couple, you build a POC, and you're off to the races. Now, if I were to be asked that question, and I would essentially be forced to add one more component, and it's ask the question of who else needs to be in that same room with you, despite the fact that it would be an uncomfortable conversation. So I'll pause there, because I know we're running a little bit over time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Current-ish examples of high-level areas that you guys have examples that you're working on?
So we're actually working with an interesting company in the loyalty points space. And so when I talked about the client that was willing to think a little bit outside of the box, typically when you think of loyalty points, you think of a loyalty points provider who sits in the middle and it has visibility into all of your transactions, both the spending transactions where you're getting points, as well as the transactions where you're redeeming points. And this one particular company was saying, okay, how do we shift the paradigm so that we give power to the end consumer? We get yes, we might get more data on certain types of transactions, but we lose the granularity to be able to do what companies usually like to do with data when it comes to certain types of analysis. How much are you comfortable with the fact that you're making this trade-off? And the client said, we're going to have to be comfortable with it, otherwise what's our role in this whole equation and should we even be bothering? So it's always going to be a matter of pros and cons, and do you really want to do this, and if so, what's the right approach for your specific entity, and how does that align with your broader strategy and goals?
So after you mentioned transparency as being one of the fundamental attributes of blockchains, but now we've got all these other things coming up where one of the fundamental attributes is privacy instead of transparency. So trustlessness, but with privacy, which changes the game. And it's been interesting to see the constellation of actors who want that, because it's not just sort of here at Hall in the day-to-day sort of individual libertarian kind of philosophy people who don't want the government to do their transactions, but also highly competitive industries, people who are engaging in high-frequency trading, derivatives, stocks, options, all kinds of things. They want to be on a blockchain, but they don't want each other to see what they're doing. It's not that if you put them on a transparent blockchain, then they can come on one another and they can play all these games and it changes the economic incentives of the market in a significant way. So these actors, the institutional financial in anonymized but trustless systems as the people who don't want the NSA sweeping on everything that they do. And then there's some government entities who really want this kind of implication as well. So it may not be the case that actually transparency is really a fundamental feature that everyone is looking for in their blockchain at the end of the day. It makes sense in supply chain management if you're trying to prove the juicy about Apple that Elliot gave the example of. So what kinds of conversations are you hearing from your clients around this? Because this is a new wrinkle on the blockchain story that didn't exist a year ago.
No, absolutely, because you're right, a year ago we weren't having all of these enterprises in the mix with a very specific set of requirements. So there are two types of workarounds. One is on the business side, the other is on the technical side, and feasibility of is it possible to obfuscate transactional details between two participants in an ecosystem from everyone else, but while still giving everyone else the trust that the transaction did in fact occur as it was intended to be. So one of those things is state channels, which is a new subject in development actively at the Ethereum community. So we actually have a developer on our team who spends a significant amount of his time figuring out, okay, how would a state channel implementation work with some of our enterprise POCs so that in the supply chain world you can see certain bits and pieces of information without seeing everything else.
Sorry, what kind of channel is going on?
Pardon?
Can you repeat that? What kind of channel?
State channels.
State channel, okay.
Nothing to do with states as in governments, it's more of a technical topic. And then the other one is more from a business perspective where in instances where you don't want that transparency, and we're seeing it primarily in the FSI intermediary space, there are certain companies that inherently don't end up reaching out to us to work through the blockchain solutioning because they're at an inherent conflict of interest if they're not willing to fundamentally change their business processes. Because sometimes that transparency aspect is just so at odds with the premise that their business has been built on.
You mentioned that one of the challenges is getting either not necessarily competing parties, but different parties with different interests in the same group together. Is there any advice or experiences that you've had that allow you to have that conversation and allow you to get more traction with your clients? Or any advice you have?
So what we found is that in the early stages, it is easier to work with just one company because once again, it's going back to the walking fast analogy. You don't have to ask 15 people for their opinion, and if you just want to test out what are the 5, 10, 15 hypotheses and can the technology support this, go and run your own internal project, but while you're doing it, think through who the other stakeholders are, even though they may not be in the room with you. So we literally have diagrams where we've designed process flows and it's company A, who's our primary client, and all these other stakeholders, and then the other boxes have just anonymized names like vendor B, financial institution C, insurance company D, because we know that eventually we'll need to sit down and say, oh, well, who do you want to actually bring to the table as part of the next round? So the baby steps and building it on top of the building blocks model, I think is probably the most likely scenario over the next little bit.
Okay, I think we're just out of time there, but again, I think all the speakers will be hanging around after the meeting. So the next kind of presentation